We're talking with John today about a whole variety of issues. Um, John, Saudi Arabia just announced their 2015 budget. Um, Certainly within Saudi Arabia, the budget is of great interest to businessmen and other people. This year, it seemed to catch interest from all corners of the world just to see what Saudi Arabia would do. You mentioned 2008 earlier. Again, this is a counter-cyclical budget that plans to deficit spend. Can you talk a little bit about this budget and what it means in terms of the economic picture in Saudi Arabia, both locally and outside of the kingdom?
Sure. There is one important message that the budget wants to state, to basically define, that regardless of what happens to oil prices, yes, oil prices have gone down, which means that oil revenue is going to be down. And that's not always good. In the case of Saudi Arabia, this is a negative to think about. However, the budget makes clear that whatever the oil story, the fiscal side of the economy, the spending of the government, the counter-cyclical fiscal policy, the positiveness that wants to be imputed and represented to the wider community, especially the private sector in Saudi Arabia, is going to be there. So the budget represents a step towards that. It's an important hallmark because the government plays a very important role in signaling, and they want to keep the economy on all engines going. They don't want to indicate that they're going to be spending less, which immediately that will change the confidence in the economy. They want to keep the confidence at the same level, if not improve. So I think this is the message of the budget. You know, the numbers are the numbers. They spend an enormous amount of money in 2014 compared to what they announced. So this is a positive. You've seen that the non-oil private sector growth has been extremely healthy, above 5%. If you account for just the non-oil component, it's above 8%. So I don't know of any country that has been growing at these levels if you take out the oil side from Saudi Arabia. So it's an important message that we're going to continue to spend. We have the firepower to do it. In fact, if you look at last year's announced budget with this year's budget, they're spending 5 billion more. You might say, well, 5 billion more reals is not that great. Well, the answer here is, well, would you have liked it to be 100 billion less? The answer would be that clearly the private sector would have taken this as an indication that the government is contracting. They don't want to spend, and immediately that will be negative for the economy. And of course, for everybody who looks at Saudi Arabia, because remember, Saudi Arabia, because I do a lot of traveling in the region and beyond, but especially in the region, everybody in the region looks at Saudi Arabia and they look at what is the budget. And it's a very much a litmus test for everybody else in the region to receive those positive vibes. Because businessmen from Saudi Arabia are expanding and have expanded in the rest of the region. They're very aggressive in other parts of the GCC. And so if the signal from the Saudi fiscal side, from the Ministry of Finance, is to contract and have a smaller budget, then that will trickle down as a signal that Saudi Arabia is spending less, and there will be less private sector investments in other parts of the GCC. So I think this is very important for Saudi Arabia and the region as a whole.
Excellent point, and that's very useful to see the perspective from the region. And Saudi Arabia, at the end of the day, I think since 2005 has overspent their announced budget annually. And to your point, I couldn't agree more. The 5 billion Saudi Riyal surplus over last year's budget was a psychological point more than anything. Now, I guess roughly 50% of the budget, close to 50% of the budget, is dedicated to healthcare and education. What other sectors do you see that got special attention in this budget? And and in those in particular, those are areas that reflect a commitment on the part of the government towards improving and underwriting and supporting improvement in Saudi quality of life issues. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how this budget was apportioned and the choices that were made?
Sure. I mean, as you said, healthcare and education always occupy a very important part of the budget. Not, of course, to discount the importance of defense and security, which usually has about 30 to 35% of the budget, depending which year, but traditionally it's about 32% of the budget. But the key message here is human capital formation, education, the skills needed, and of course healthcare, very important part of that. You cannot have a nation without having a healthy nation. And although today this is a very young country, over the years it will age, and you would require a lot of healthcare for the aging population. So I think it's very much a budget that follows on all the other budgets that we have seen. The only difference and misunderstanding is, of course, this notion that suddenly wages for the public sector are going to decline. I think this is a misinterpretation of what analysts have read from the budget. I don't think that you will see a decline in wages, but you will see the freezing of wages. You're not going to see an increase in 2015, and that's natural because wages and salaries occupy a large portion of the budget. It has done so for many years, and they have risen over the last several years as a result of inflation, as a result of the adjustments that were made, especially in 2006, 2007, and 2008. But it's very much a budget that wants to expand in many ways. It's not anything that is out of the ordinary, and it's sending an important message that they will continue to do what is required in order to keep the economy going.